you might end up in these ruts where, you know, the answers just aren't coming to you. But if you bake that into the process, you're going to find actually that you become more creative. Coding for 8 hours straight just isn't possible. You're paid to do it, you know. If you're working 9 to 5, then that's what the business is asking you to do. And it's why they're putting money in your bank. But let's say hypothetically you got on that David Goggins Sigma male grind set and you sat down at 9 AM and you just powered on from then until 5. How much of that time spent do you actually think would be production level, maintainable, good code? How many problems do you think you would actually solve in that time? And now I'm sure there's some people out there who are like, oh, well, you know, we had a feature that needed doing by Tuesday and it was Monday, so I had to work 12 hours straight to get it done. Sure, I don't doubt that that has happened, but the difference between having something done in a short burst versus having to do something repeatably, Monday to Friday, week after week, is a very different game. You're just going to end up either burning out, writing terrible code, or just hating your life. It's a fast track to depression. Now, there's actually a pretty simple solution. I'm surprised it's not talked about more. So in this video, I'm going to cover time chunking. What is it? How does it work? I'm going to cover why you should consider it over other productivity methods. And then we're going to talk about the common mistakes that people make that lead them to committing to a system but ending up with the same problems of burnout, not coming up with good solutions. Right, so what is time chunking? Well, the name is pretty self-explanatory, right? You chunk your time up based on what you're working on. Now, what should that look like? Well, presumably you work a 9 to 5. Let's say that either, you know, you're employed or you're not. Either way, you're going to commit to working 8 hours on a certain day. How do you split that up? Well, some people would just go hardcore with like the Pomodoro technique, right? Of like, right, work 25 minutes, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes, 5 minutes off, and just keep on going until you have the outcome that you're after. But I think that you're missing a step if you do that. And the reason is that, okay, let's say, okay, I've got a task that's going to take me 2 days. I'm going to do this 25-minute repeat thing. That would be 16 hours for the next 16 hours. And hopefully by the end of it, that task will be done. Now, the problem with doing something like that, your outcome is spread across 2 days. You're not going to get that dopamine hit or that, okay, I've achieved something until the whole thing is done, which it might overrun. 2 days is a long time to be waiting to feel like you've actually achieved something. So what I would actually do is split it up into 4-hour chunks and schedule them on the calendar. Actually, if you have a work calendar, use that. I use my Google Calendar, my personal one. Just drag out a 4-hour block and say, right, here's what I want to achieve within that time. Now, if you're struggling to think of, okay, how do I split this task into 4 parts, ChatGPT will probably do a good job of that. What are the 4 main points? What could I get done from this task in 4 hours? What's the goal? What's the outcome? And it'll give you, split this into 4 hours, you know, even if it's like a 5-day task. Be like, split this into 4-hour achievable chunks and just schedule them on your calendar. Never schedule like multiple days ahead. Just do, okay, this is what I'm going to get done today. There's no point worrying about tomorrow, because if you start scheduling things tomorrow and you get to tomorrow and you haven't finished the thing you were working on yesterday, you know, you're just going to feel shit about it. There's no point doing it. You can't truly define how long something's going to take you, but it's always worth giving yourself a deadline. And the reason that you give yourself a deadline is you probably had this at university. You know, you're putting off the deadline and it should have taken you a month to do, but in the last couple of days, because the deadline's now so close, you're super motivated and you get it done in 2 days. But if you'd started earlier, maybe you would have taken longer. And it's this whole idea that a job will fill the time that you allocate. Okay, so you've got your 4-hour block. How do you spend that time? Well, actually, at this point, that's when I would use the Pomodoro technique. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Windows 11 actually has the timer built in. If you go down to the notification center and you click the button focus, it just defaults. It immediately gives you 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And what I would do is I would just use that until you get your 4-hour block done. And then at the end of it, well, it's probably your lunchtime. Go do something else for another half hour. And when you come back, you've got an entirely new job to do because you're moving towards a different goal and you've hopefully finished the other goal. So one of the benefits that comes out of this is that you're actually going to start building up a log of things that you've completed, which will make things like code sprint stand-ups. You know, if the boss is like, oh, what did you spend yesterday doing? You're going to have a higher resolution list dating back as long as you're tracking of, okay, well, actually on these days I did these things, on these days these are the things I did. They're not going to care about what you did on a 5-minute, 10-minute, half an hour basis, are they? They're just going to care about like the 2 main things that you're focusing on per day, and by this system, that's what you're recording. So why is this better than other methods? Well, like I touched on earlier, the problem with just a generic Pomodoro technique is you're working with like an undefined limit. It's just, okay, I'm going to do work for this amount of time. And without that sense of urgency, with having a goal that is achievable within those 4 hours, you're just going to let the time spread. Now, that's not to say the Pomodoro technique is bad, which is why it's included, you know? Why do we use something like the Pomodoro technique? Well, it's the same reason why I think I'm more productive in the office than when I work from home. See, when I'm in the office, I'm surrounded by, you know, my colleagues. And every, half hour, maybe hour, we go grab a coffee, you know, or we stop for a second just to have a quick chat. Now, I think to the untrained eye, that's going to look like it's unproductive, but actually, you're kind of baking in this fresh set of eye protocol, right? Now, what that means is actually you're kind of like baking in these mini breaks where you're not just accumulating this stress of, working on the task, getting to the point where, oh, like, I'm just bashing my head against a wall. No, you've got baked in resets where you're coming back and being like, right, okay, let's get to it. And what I find happens when I work from home is that I don't have those cues around me. And I mean, yeah, Christ, so you can end up in a situation where you end up working your 8 hours and some because you're not keeping track of the time. And the next thing you know, you've worked way too many hours straight. And the next day, you're just mentally destroyed. I mean, let alone the next day, maybe the same day, you want to go out with your friends and do some stuff, but you're just so drained from working so hard and flat out that, it's stealing from your own time. And it's not even like it benefits the company, because if you burn yourself out for the next day, the code you write the next day is going to be shit. Now, there's quite a few mistakes that people make when doing this kind of system. And the first one is probably having too long a time box. I think it's easy to adopt the idea of, okay, I'm going to block out 4 hours, do the 4 hours work, move on to a different goal. That makes sense to me. But why would I use the Pomodoro timer? Why would I take a break every 25 minutes? I can work 4 hours straight. Of course you can work 4 hours straight. That's not the point. Just because you can do that doesn't mean that it's optimal. One obvious example is how often do you actually get to the point where you're completely stuck with a thing, you walk away, maybe it's the end of your day, so you sleep, wake up the next day, and the idea comes to you, you got it, you're like, oh, okay, no, that was it. And then you come back to it and suddenly everything makes sense and you're going for it. It's this whole concept of, coming back with fresh eyes. It works. If you give your brain an actual break to context switch and think about other things and then come back to the problem, those ideas are still bubbling away in your subconscious, the answers are going to present themselves. And if you force yourself to work 4 hours straight without taking a break, you might end up in these ruts where the answers just aren't coming to you. But if you bake that into the process, you're going to find actually that you become more creative. And it's why the Pomodoro technique isn't just taken by people who do office work. It's taken up by creatives as well. This is a proven process of making you more efficient at working. But speaking of context switching, that should only be done in the break, in the 5 minutes, go grab a coffee, get outside, see some sunlight, quickly watch a video on YouTube, whatever it is. But your 25 minutes of working needs to be uninterrupted, no context switching, one goal. Because if you've got a bunch of YouTube tabs open on your computer or your phone's on your desk and it's distracting you, that's the kind of context switching that we're avoiding because we're allocating a time for that to happen. The whole reason that this works is because you set that 25 minutes and you eliminate all distractions. And if that means that in the room that you work in, there are no distractions, and then when you have your 5-minute break, you go into the other room where your phone is and your TV is or whatever it is that you're using for that 5-minute break, that's what you need to do. You can't be mixing the context switching. They have to be distinct blocks. And so I guess the last problem then that we come to is, well, how efficient are you actually being with your time? You're blocking out this time to work, and sure, you're going to achieve your goal in 4 hours, but how can you actually increase your capacity so that you can achieve more in that time space? Well, I actually have a video on that, and it basically plays off the whole idea of what are the guys that you would consider a 10x developer doing differently to what you're doing. So if you click that video there, I'll make you more efficient with this time for you. Cheers.